The Marvels is better than you think it is. Now, it's definitely not one of Marvel's best projects, but it's far from the worst either. And I think it's kind of a middle of the pack Marvel movie, so let's talk about it. As always, this video will have spoilers for the movie, so if you don't want spoilers, head over to my shorts or my TikTok and check out my one-take movie review on this movie. But without further ado, let's talk about The Marvels. So in this movie, we follow Carol, Monica, and Kamala as they find out that they are switching places because of their powers. Now they must all come together and figure out what's going on as they form this little team and take on the new villain known as Dar-Ben. Kicking things off with the good, and the first thing I have here is the chemistry we have between our three main characters. I mean, it was just great. And every time these three were on screen together, having a conversation, it was electric in my opinion. I mean, these three just made this movie so much fun. I mean, there was that one scene when they were trying to control when they switched back and forth between each other, and that was just a really cool scene to watch because it was like the first time in the movie where they truly became a team in this movie. And also the dialogue between all three of them just flowed so well. It didn't feel forced, not one bit in this movie, and you could really tell that all three of these actresses just really enjoyed working with each other, and it was a blast to watch all three of them on screen. And that kind of leads me right into my next thing, and even though all three of these actresses were great in this movie, it was clear that Iman Vellani was the standout in this film. She just did amazing in this film, and this is probably, in my opinion, one of the best castings that the MCU has done. I mean, Iman Vellani is Kamala Khan, and Kamala Khan is Iman Vellani. She was just really funny and witty throughout this entire movie and just really brought even more fun to this movie than there already was. And I think the best part about her powers is that she is literally every MCU fan if we ever got powers and got to fight along some of the Marvel characters. And finally, for the good, I have the action. Now, I thought this was some of the more creative action that we've gotten from the MCU in a while. I mean, the first part of this movie where we got that first big fight scene when they're all kind of switching back and forth between different places was one of my favorite parts of the movie. I mean, we're going from the space station to Kamala's house, back out to wherever Captain Marvel was during that time, and they were all three switching and fighting simultaneously, and that was just one of the coolest scenes of the movie because we really hadn't seen Marvel do an action scene like that before. It was also cool to see Kamala use her powers in ways that we hadn't seen yet, and also this was truly our first look at what Monica could do in a fighting sense, and it was really cool to see her use her powers as well. And then as always, it's always cool to see Captain Marvel, who's probably the most overpowered character in Marvel outside of the Scarlet Witch, use her powers as well during all these action scenes. Moving on to the so-so, and starting off here, I have the villain. Now, the villain in this movie was just super bland in my opinion, and that's no shade to the actress that was playing her. It was just a case of another average, bland MCU villain. Now, they did try to give her some depth and kind of explain her motives in this movie, but due to the relatively short runtime of this movie, they didn't really have time to expand on her character. So when I saw her on screen, I just didn't really care about what she was up to. She was just kind of another villain that the good guys would essentially have to defeat in the end. I do wish we got to spend just a little bit more time with her because I feel like they could have grown her character just a little bit more, and they did plant some seeds there in the beginning for her to have a pretty cool character arc, but they never really capitalized on any of that. So as we got to that final battle in the end, I just didn't really care much about it, and it kind of felt anticlimactic, which leads me on to the next thing I have here for the so-so, and that is that final battle at the end was a little bit anticlimactic in my opinion. So this final battle just felt really short in my opinion, and that could also be because of the relatively short runtime again of this movie. But when I was watching this battle, it really just felt like I'd seen the whole thing in the trailers. I mean, that's really how short it was. And once again, if this movie was a little bit longer, we could have spent a little bit more time with the characters, and I think that would have helped this moment feel a little bit bigger than it was. But at the end of the day, it did just feel like they wanted to get the villain out of the way so they could send Monica to the X-Men universe and start setting up that. Now, I'm really excited that they're setting up the X-Men universe. I just wish this final battle meant a little bit more than it did. And finally, getting into the bad, and the first thing I have here is that there were a couple scenes in this movie that just kind of felt out of place. And the first one that came to mind was when they're at Atlantia, I think it was called, and we kind of had that big little singing kind of dancing scene. Now I understood what they were doing there. Dar-Ben wanted to take this planet's water, and obviously the Marvels had to stop her. but the whole singing and dancing scene kind of took me out of the movie and put a pause on what was happening. And it was a relatively short scene and a small part of this movie, but it was one of those scenes where I was just like, did we really need that in this movie? It just felt really random in my opinion. And another scene that I thought was kind of random and weird was the Flirkin scene when they're eating all the crew members on the Sabre station to get them off of that station. And it was funny, I will admit, but when you're dealing with the end of the world and we're right before the climax of the movie, it was kind of weird to see them hurting and catching cats around this space station right before we got to this big battle at the end. And finally, for the bad, I have the character moments, and kind of what I mean by this is when we got an opportunity to build these characters and give them a little bit more depth, it felt a little bit rushed, and I think that's because of the short runtime. I mean, we would get to these moments where the scene is supposed to be a little bit more emotional and we're supposed to kind of build the characters in this part of the movie, but then it just felt they kind of not necessarily skipped over it, but as I said, just really rushed through that part and got to the next scene. And we really didn't get to sit with the characters and watch them grow. And once again, I kind of know I'm repeating myself, but I think that is because of the relatively short runtime of this movie. For instance, I was really curious to see how they handled Monica and Carol's relationship after Carol hadn't come back after so many years. And that was pretty much just solved with like a big group hug. And I feel like that could have been a huge plot point in this movie. But again, say it again, because of the runtime, they kind of just skipped over that, solved it with a hug, and we were on to the next thing. And I think that could have been a real big opportunity for growth in that relationship and build a little bit more depth in these characters. But overall, this is a fun movie. It's not one of Marvel's best projects, but it's also far from the worst. Monica, Carol, and Kamala were great on screen together, and the action was really creative in this movie. It has its shortcomings, but it's still a movie that you can enjoy. Those are my thoughts on the Marvels. Be sure to let me know what you thought of the movie down in the comments, and as always, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, get your Eazy Apparel at shopeasyapparel.com. God bless, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.